My name is Ferdinand de Vera, and I'm here to talk about the problem of fossil fuels in energy production. Now, fossil fuels, we already know what they are, or at the very least have heard of them. If you haven't, you've been living under a rock, or coal for that matter. After all, when talking about the environment, fossil fuels seem to be brought up in one way or another. With all of this attention when it comes to fossil fuels, why exactly is it brought up so much? While it is thrown around that fossil fuels impact the environment in a negative way, many don't know why, and even more don't have an idea on how to solve the problem. This issue is important to not only myself, but to the entire world, as the impacts left in the wake of fossil fuels can severely affect everyone globally. Even today, if you were to go outside in most major cities, you would notice that the air is much more gross compared to more rural areas. And while I'm no genius, I happen to have my own idea on how to solve this issue. Before getting into the reason why fossil fuels are an issue to the environment, we must see why it's so commonly used. The primary reason why fossil fuels are very heavily used is that they are in very high supply. This high supply of fossil fuels makes it very cheap to get a hold and use them, allowing for it to account for 85% of the world's demand for energy. Big whoop, right? I mean, who cares? Power is power, and if it's cheap and effective, what's the issue? Well, the issue is that the primary effect that fossil fuels have on the environment is that they release carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and absorbs and radiates heat. While this is necessary for the environment, too much carbon dioxide can cause the temperature of the Earth to rise. Along with raising the Earth's temperature, carbon dioxide also affects the acidity of water. What happens is that carbon becomes aqueous in water, and then reacts with water again to create carbonic acid. The carbonic acid finally interacts with the water again, lowering the pH as H3O is produced. When the carbonic acid gives hydrogen to the water, the effect that lowering pH has on the environment is that it hinders the growth and destroys shellfish shells. The H3O interacts with the calcium in the water that would be used in order to create shells, meaning there's less material to build shells. The H3O in the water can also take calcium from already existing shells. The hindrance of growth of the shellfish not only affects the animals directly, but everything that eats the shellfish as well as the rest of the ecosystem also suffers when there is less shellfish. Now I've said I've had the solution to the problem, and the solution I had in mind is to use an alternate energy source. Now we can use stuff like solar and wind power, and granted those are other possibilities when it comes to reducing the use of fossil fuels, but the alternate energy source of energy I want to focus on is nuclear energy. I know what you're thinking. When most people think about nuclear energy, they think about nuclear weapons. While the idea of nuclear power may seem scary, just hear me out and I'll explain why this would be a good solution. First off, nuclear weapons and nuclear power are two completely different things. Nuclear power commonly works by using a fission reactor, which splits nucleus atoms, usually uranium, into two equal-sized nuclei. A lot of energy is released by this reaction, and with the formation of radioactive products, neutrons are emitted. These neutrons can cause fission in other nuclei, causing a chain reaction. What's important is that a large amount of energy is produced, even though there is no carbon made from these reactions. In fact, nuclear energy has already slowed down the production of carbon, as emissions would be 30% higher without nuclear energy. In 2004, the use of 103 nuclear reactors in the US were able to prevent 697 tons of carbon. MIT estimates that tripling worldwide nuclear generating capacity by 2050 would eliminate 25% of carbon emissions. This is a realistic response as well, as the energy output and cost to use nuclear is very comparable to fossil fuels. For example, the cost of nuclear power is $1.87 per kilowatt hour, and coal, which is the most common fossil fuel to produce electricity, costs $2.75 per kilowatt hour. With better pricing, there is incentive to use nuclear energy. This solution is a mitigation of the problem. I would classify it as a mitigation of the problem as it removes the cause of the problem in the first place. The cause of the problem is the heavy use of fossil fuels in producing energy due to its high supply. Meanwhile, the effects of the problem is the CO2 created and its environmental impact. My solution aims to opt out of using fossil fuels for power, in the first place removing the cause of the problem. While all of this sounds perfect, a good solution must address its faults. The largest obstacle in implementing my positive response is the fact that nuclear waste is created when generating nuclear power. The nuclear waste created from nuclear power is dangerous, as it is very radioactive and lasts for tens of thousands of years. There are concerns when it comes to storing this dangerous material due to its long lifespan. This obstacle can be overcome with the use of lasers. Researchers were able to find a way to turn the radioactive waste product, iodine-129, into iodine-128. by using a large laser that focused a high amount of electricity to a small spot of iodine-129. This process knocked out a neutron, turning it into iodine-128. This is important because iodine-128 only has a half-life of 25 minutes as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of years that iodine-129 lasts for. For the time being, the process isn't able to be used easily or widely, though, if given enough time and research, there is a future potential and the process can be scaled up. At the very least, the fact that there is indeed a way to get rid of nuclear waste shows the main problem with my positive response is able to be overcome. The issue of fossil fuels and energy production is not an easy one to solve. For every solution, there seems to be a sort of drawback in implementing the solutions. Despite that, I think even bringing awareness to our other options is a step in the right direction when it comes to stopping the issue. I know it seemed a bit weird at first, but I hope you at least got to understand a bit more about how the use of nuclear energy could be useful in at least reducing the use of fossil fuels in energy production.